Colombia's guerrilla war is one of the world's longest-running conflicts. Now, the latest round of talks at ending decades of left-wing insurgency in the South American country have begun. It's part of efforts by Colombian President Gustavo Petro to try and end violence in rural areas, which has been escalating despite efforts to secure ceasefires. Petro is a former guerrilla fighter himself. Delegates from the Colombian government are meeting in Venezuela with representatives of the second Marquetalia group that's led by former members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC, which signed a peace deal with the Colombian government back in 2016. Now, the head of the guerrilla delegation at these new talks in Caracas is Iván Márquez. He's a former FARC commander who was part of the 2016 talks. He even entered the Colombian parliament as part of the old deal. But he returned to the jungle to take up arms 2 years later and has led a renewed insurgency ever since. A lot to unpack here, and that is why we're bringing in Santiago López. He's a journalist from Colombia and joins us from Pereira. Santiago, tell us more about the second Marquetalia group. How big are they and what are their goals?
Nicole, Segunda Marquetalia is a dissident faction of the now demobilized FARC, as you mentioned. Let's remember that they agree a peace agreement with the government in 2016, but 3 years later, some members of the rebel group now transform into a political party. They disagree with many different topics involved in the implementation of the peace agreement, and they split off. Just to mention a few numbers, just to give you a perspective how big this group are, is they started in 2019, and they had at that time just a few members, but nowadays they have about 1,751 members across the country. 1,200 of them are part of the armed forces located in the jungle in the south part of the country. And according to the Colombian intelligence, they are involved into narco traffic and delinquency cases in different cities and areas in the country. Also, the Colombian intelligence said that the leaders of the Segunda Marquetalia are based in Venezuela, where they get support from the Maduro's government. From Venezuela, they control the group in the southern part of Colombia. Just to give you another brief numbers, when they started in 2018, they had presence in 124 towns and villages in different areas of the country. Years later, nowadays, in 2024, they have presence in 300. That means they have grown its presence in 141%.
Yeah, and the presence is most notable in remote parts of Colombia, right? How is guerrilla activity affecting people's lives there?
Yeah, Segunda Marquetalia has a very specific area where they are located. That means they are located in the regions of Cauca and Nariño. These areas are in the south west of Colombia, near the border with Ecuador. And why is that? Because it's located in a very specific and very strategic corridor for the narco traffic industry. Because on that way, they can take all the cocaine from the plantations and fields in the eastern part of the Andes Mountains. They take the cocaine across the mountains up until the jungle and the Pacific coast in order to send it to different parts around the world. It's a very strategic area, also because it's very mountainous and also because the lack of state presence. And it's a perfect scenario for them to have presence there, because also they can force the farmers to change the fields they have, the plantations they have, let's say fruits, vegetables, coffee. They are forced to change it to cocaine plantations in order to grow the production, and that's why they are forced. So if we take a look to the situation for the civilians living there, is every day like a nightmare, living under fire between the army and the combats between the army and the rebels, and also forced by the rebel groups to start the plantations and also look after the plantations of cocaine, because if they don't do it, they face a different and very difficult situations, like the kids can get raped, and in the worst of the cases, they can be forced to recruit the lines of the rebel groups.
Yeah, that's a horrible, horrible situation to live in. Now, the President Gustavo Petro ran on a platform of bringing total peace to Colombia. What's different about his approach to ending the violence to that of his predecessors?
Some members of the opposition in Colombia and also some members of the political sectors and sectors also of the Colombian society, they still don't understand what paz total or total peace means for the government, because the government didn't explain exactly what they wanted and how they were going to implement this proposal and what were the foundation of this total peace strategy. For some members of the opposition, it's just a brand that was used by Petro during the campaign when he was running for the Colombian presidency. But what is different, if we take in consideration the other different peace talks held by the government and the different rebel groups along the history of Colombia, is that this time the government is trying to talk face-to-face in different rounds of conversations with the different specific groups that are involved in the conflict in Colombia. That we have to mention is not only the left-wing guerrillas historically in the country, we also have many delinquential groups, very small, spread across the country. They are involved in different sectors of the narco-traffic chain, and that's why they are involved, and they are very important for this industry, and they must be in this taken into consideration in this paz total.
Yeah, we only have about a minute left, but I don't want to let you go without asking you about how Colombians feel about this, because they're scarred by decades of insurgency. It's really hard to find someone in the country who hasn't been affected by the violence in one way or another. So seeing the government talking again to guerrillas and most likely giving them amnesty in the end, how do people feel about that?
Well, it seems that talking about peace in Colombia is still a very popular topic for politicians, for different sectors of the society. So it's still a main concern for Colombians, because the country is not under peace. You still have a conflict active in different regions, and is escalating day by day in different areas, especially in Cauca and Nariño recently. But what Colombians want to see is a real peace, a real effort from the government, from the guerrillas, from the different groups involved in the conflict in order to get peace.
Santiago López González, journalist in Pereira in Colombia. Thank you so much.